Good morning, everybody. I'm Julie Cole.
And I'm JP Cole.
And welcome back to our latest podcast in our Build Your Best Life series. We just want to take a minute to intro and say hello.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us again.
We're trying another new angle this morning.
We're good.
Oh, the timer.
We're good.
I was like, what
there
is
we
that?
go.
We're trying another new angle this morning, so bear with us. We're
Yep.
just trying to, we got feedback that JP needed to move towards the camera a little bit and try to look at the camera more. So we're trying to honor that, right?
Yep.
So we always jump in with our point of gratitude. So did you want to do that this morning, or you want me to do it?
Yeah. So today we wanted to say a big thank you to Shelly Fuquay. I really hope I got that right. I've been practicing all morning.
Art and Soul.
Art and Soul Creations by Shelly out in Chapin, South Carolina. She does this amazing metal work that you see. Yeah. We've got pieces all over our house, all over the gym. I'm kind of a metal and wood kind of person. I really just like the look of it. She does an excellent job. It's all hand done.
Yeah. I think that's the big thing that people have to understand is she literally she's a shop on her property and she hand solders all of this. So all of these pieces, like all these details are hand soldered. Our logo back here.
Hand cut. It's not a solder, but yeah.
Hand cut. So it's done by hand. So she freehands it all. So what you can see that we have here, and we'll post some other pictures of some stuff we have and link her this week so you can see what good stuff she has. We have our little owl, our logo. Yep,
she did the logo for us, the welcome sign.
And then our welcome sign here.
We got some chimes at the house and a flower. And anyways, thank you so much because you do great work for us and we appreciate it. And we just wanted to say thank you and let anybody who's watching know what that stuff is in the back. And if you want to contact her, check out our Facebook page, Art and Soul Creations by Shelly.
Shelly.
Yes.
She's also, for our local folks, she has a shop at Podon Collar out in
Little Mountain.
Yep. So, and she has some stuff, and she's got some upcoming shows that she's going to be at too. So you can jump on her Facebook page and see where she's going to be. So she'll be traveling some, so she might actually be closer to some other folks who are out of town.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you need metal work, hit Shelly up.
That's right. That's awesome.
Yep.
So this morning we're going to jump back in.
Forgot what we were even talking about.
That's okay. Visualizing the change.
There we go.
Yep. So we're, over the last week we kind of talked about, we're digging into step one, which is develop a deep and meaningful understanding of where you want to be. And last week we talked about kind of putting a stake in the ground and a starting point. And we talked about SMART goal setting.
Just kind of first pass.
Yep. First pass. And then really kind of introduce this concept that, initial goals especially are the formulation of a hypothesis and that they really should be open to change as new information is gathered, And so we're really testing that theory. Is this going to work? If not, we discard what's not working and work on something new. So an evolution or a different piece of that is now, deepening that is visualizing the change.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. How do we spend some time just even considering, like you alluded to earlier, the miracle question of if you woke up tomorrow and this change happened, how would your life be different?
Sure.
And I think that's a really powerful question that we often ask in therapy a lot. But what would happen in our lives if whatever that change was, if I wrote down a SMART goal for physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, financial health, whatever it is, if I were to wake up tomorrow and that thing has just happened, how would my life feel different?
And I introduced in the blog a concept of doing a scan, right?
Yeah.
So how does it feel different physically? How does it feel different emotionally? How does it feel different in our mental process, or how does it feel different spiritually?
Yeah. And when you think about that, why is that so important?
So I think part of it is because a lot of times we just have this one-dimensional thought, right? So if we want to lose weight, we think about what we're going to look like. We can visualize the clothes we're going to wear or what we might look like, or, and then stepping out of that and saying also, for some people, it's like how they think they're going to feel, not just feel emotionally, but physically. Like I know for me, when, it's also like, how does my body feel different in movement? What am I able to accomplish, And so it's really thinking about it, from a 360 view. But also too, it kind of sets us up to really grapple a little bit.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you like to say is, my mind just went blank. Hold on. Where was I going with that? Oh, to feel. Yeah.
Brain fart.
I know, right? to feel.
Yeah.
Like to actually sit in the feeling.
Yeah.
Feel what
Experience it.
Yeah. And then, and then what is that? And so it's a kind of a, the deepening of the miracle question. Yeah.
Yeah. As we were talking about it, two of the main things that I thought about is the importance of this exercise of practicing, visualizing what it would be like if our lives had that change occurred, is on the front end, getting a better understanding of, all right, what are some things I need to look out for and be prepared for within that process.
So managing our
identifying
our expectations.
Yep. But then also this will help us in what we're going to talk about next week, which is to truly have a meaningful purpose to this change, because if that isn't there, if it stays surface level, it's never going to be a large enough investment for us to stick in with the long haul. One of the things that I've noticed with not only myself but clients that we work with is that it has to have, for lack of a better term, that depth and weight of meaning behind it for me to want to do it. It has to be more than just I want to lose 5 pounds, or I want to meet a financial number. I want to take my family on a vacation. There's always this deeper meaning, and we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
But this helps with that.
Right.
Better understand when I know what it feels like. I have a better understanding of why it's important to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when people talk about this concept of visualizing the change, it's so that you can visualize what you think it's going to look like and backtrack for your goal setting, right? But what we're talking about is a little bit more deep, right? Which is that like really preparing yourself to contend with your expectations. You all right?
Yeah.
Sorry, we're trying to work around the beard here.
I have to talk around my mustache.
so, and so when we're talking about that idea of like of visualizing what it feels like, I was thinking about it kind of contrasted with the thing that you like to say a lot, which is that our brain likes to overestimate what it can be accomplished in the short term and underestimate what can happen in the long term. Sorry, I don't want to share this with anybody.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, so how can that process, like when the way we feel, so a lot of times what people do is they visualize how they can feel or they think they're going to feel, and that becomes the litmus by which they judge how they should feel. Right. So when you
even have to hold that loosely.
Right. Well, because really it's what they feel like at the end, but they expect to have that feeling in the short term because the brain overestimates that what can happen. So we have this idea that we're going to feel a certain way when we hit a goal, or like our short-term goals to get to the bigger goal, or when we've accomplished a win in the process. And so what a lot of people don't anticipate is that sometimes you don't feel the way you think you're going to feel. Sometimes it's like kind of
Yeah, and for those of us that struggle with addiction or substance use, like that's a common theme, is this lack of tapping into an experience or literally anything being as satisfying or pleasurable as we expected it to be.
Right. It's the novelty concept, right?
Yeah.
Because that's I was thinking about this when we were planning this. I was really thinking about that concept too of, you can, when I was still using, like I could get high before I ever got high.
I want to talk about that too, because that's true in this process. We need to keep in mind that the visualization is not the end point.
Sure.
And I always think about this with a dietary change or an exercise program.
Right.
I've had 1,000 different times in which on a Saturday and Sunday, I've decided to make a change.
Yeah.
I've written the workout. I've mapped out in my head what the food is going to be.
Sure.
The brain releases a little bit of dopamine and serotonin and the works, almost like as a reward process from visualizing what that change is going to feel like. And then without continuing to keep going, we just take that reward as the low-hanging fruit.
Sure.
And, so basically I'll write a diet and then I'll be like, oh man, you did so good thinking about that. You feel so good. You should go eat McDonald's.
That's right. Well, that's why motivation's not a feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Why motivation's not a feeling. It makes me think about the stages of change. And so, for those who may not know it, the stages of change. So there's this pre-contemplative state where you're not even aware that there's a change that needs to happen.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then there's this contemplative state where maybe you have an aha, or there's an inkling that maybe something needs to give, right? And so then you have this preparation stage. And what you're talking about is the preparation stage.
Yeah.
People have a flash of motivation. They have that aha moment. They think that this preparation stage is action.
Yeah.
And then they shortchange themselves because you get the short-term payoff of visualizing it, which actually short changes or short circuits the long-term goal, right? Because you don't ever get started.
Yeah.
Or the other thing happens is you actually start in an action process, right? Which is the next stage. So you prep all your food, you get everything together, and then day 2 or 3 happens, right? Energy drops.
Yep.
Doesn't
feel like I expected it to feel. I don't like it as much as I thought I would.
I'm so hungry.
If I haven't created enough different metrics, I may be not tracking towards my goal, so I'm disappointed in it.
Sure.
My expectations are off.
Yeah. And this is something we talked about this week. It's common for people to get into about 21 to 28 days of a nutritional change, and you start a tissue detox, right? And so what happens is a lot of times you see a temporary weight gain or a puffing up, right? So where all of a sudden
you feel like crap.
Right.
Yeah.
You get all of a sudden you're tired again. And so you have this burst of energy, and then now all of a sudden you're tired, you're hungry, you have all of this stuff. And so what's so hard is that when we're trying to superimpose that against the way we think it should feel or what we think it should look like, that imposter syndrome comes in, which is that this isn't real. I'm really fat. I'm really stupid. I'm really, the narrative, the old narrative that kept us locked in that behavior.
That we're more used to than the new narrative.
Absolutely. We fall back into that. And so part of it was just really about us being able to weigh and adjust our initial mindset. So why this ties into what we talked about last week, is that last week we talked about this is the forming of a hypothesis.
Yeah.
This is an experiment, right? It's an experiment. So it's getting out of this mindset that we have to, buy that new program or try this different eating style or do this exercise style. And it's human nature, by the way. We have bought more eating plans. Tried a bunch of different exercise styles. And the irony of it is we've gotten to this point where we realize like all of those things were useful because now we just do a little bit of all of it.
Yeah.
But we've also shifted our mindset through the years. And we did that. We thought, I'm going to buy this food plan. And then it wasn't functional for some reason. Or I didn't
adhere to it.
Right. As soon as it felt.
But it's not a failure.
Right.
All of that cumulative work. I was talking with somebody the other day about that, especially with dietary stuff and with recovery. We'll talk about that too, but that there is this cumulative effect. It's not like every time I've gotten off my eating plan that it's a failure. Like over the years, all those different styles of meal prepping and cooking and tracking food and doing it. Today, I now have a natural way that I'm interacting with that feels right for me, and I figured it out, but it is a little bit of all these different things that I've learned. So none of them were failures because I couldn't have the success I have today without all of those things.
And we learn so much about ourselves individually and together through the process.
Yeah. And that's true for our mental health journey too, which is that if there is a relapse with whether it's substance use or depression or an increase in our anxiety or whatever it is that we're dealing with, it's not a failure. It's not like somebody from Men in Black jumps out and erases our memory of all the positive things that have happened previously. We continue to build upon that, even though there are setbacks and we're not getting the outcome results that we want.
Sure. Well, and also too, some of that's also reframing. So what we're trying to push people to do in this podcast series is just to reframe how we even approach it to begin with. And so I love that we talk about substance use and addiction because in every other area of chronic health disorders with diabetes and heart disease and lung diseases and things like that, the expectation is that people will wrestle with the disease process. Yeah. And with addiction, we treat it like our substance use. We treat it like it's this one or done thing.
That it's an acute thing that you should be
Right. You should go
fixed.
to treatment one time, and you should be, you should maintain abstinence, and, and you should have all the benefits of, 20 years of change process in 30 days.
Yeah.
And so some of it's how we frame it. Some of y'all know me, some of y'all don't, but, that's a lot of what I train on. And when I do consulting work, I've helped work with agencies, organizations, systems on shifting to that recovery oriented mindset.
Yeah.
And so that process-oriented mindset is such an essential element to really locking into the one thing we know works.
Yeah.
Above all things, consistency.
Yeah. Consistency is key. Yeah.
And I laugh because so many people get weird when we start saying this, but if you actually look at meta-analysis of all the research for all the eating styles that exist in the world, none of them hands down have a better outcome than the other when consistently applied over a long period of time. Over a long period of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're just trying to find the one that you can stick to.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And it may be that, somebody, keto works for this person and veganism works for this person and, whatever, gluten-free, whatever we have going on, Whole30. I mean, like
it really is. How can you nourish and take care of your body and enjoy it along the way so that you stick with it?
Absolutely.
Because if I'm not enjoying it and having fun with it, I'm not going to stick with it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say the other part with the addiction too is going back to that idea of substance use. When we talk about that, is this idea that if somebody has diabetes and they come into the doctor and they have an elevated A1C, the doctor says, okay, let's talk about what's going on, what's changed in your life so we can identify an issue.
Yeah.
Somebody gets identified as having pre-diabetes or they're at risk for diabetes, they get referred to they get an education program, right? So a lot of times we refer them to resources that help educate them about what they have going on, and then support systems. And when we treat somebody with diabetes and their symptoms are continuing to persist, even if they've made some changes or they're on medication, they see that as a person needing more support.
Yeah. Not as a...
And I think it's really important because when we talk about substance use, the way that the people criticize in an echo chamber can happen with all change behavior. So it's the idea of you start eating healthy, then people want to, criticize the way you're eating and say that they're worried about you when they weren't worried about you before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just because I decided to not go eat at a certain restaurant with people because... they're like, oh, we're worried about how you're... No, yeah. So visualizing this outcome, another thought that I had that I think is really important. So why do we do this? That the first piece that I brought up was so that we can almost kind of predict what are those things that as we build a process or a program, what do we need to be mindful of? And I think about what I call the Air Force technique. I have no idea if this came from the Air Force or not. So we need to talk with Emily or somebody like that and find out. I don't even know if pilots actually do this, but I heard somewhere that pilots meditate and visualize on best case, worst case, most likely scenario. And walk through that entire process. So, if all heck breaks loose and nothing goes as planned, how do I walk through that process?
That's right.
If everything goes great, if I'm trying to make a dietary change and there's zero food cravings and my energy is high and I'm losing weight at 10 pounds an hour and everything is going right, how am I going to handle that? And then also, how can I visualize what is the most likely scenario?
You're going to plateau.
Yeah.
You're going to have sticking points. You'll have setbacks in the way
it's going to be a little bit of both.
Yeah. You'll get sick.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't get to work out and you lose motivation.
Same thing with our mental health,
That's right.
But it helps us kind of scale it to think about what is that worst case scenario? What is that best case scenario? What is the most likely scenario? So if you're in the Air Force and you guys don't do this, I'm sorry, I'm giving you credit for it. You can correct me on that. I would love to find out more about it. But either way, it's a useful tool for all of the goals that we're looking for. And later we'll use that information to begin creating workarounds within your own process to build your best life.
That's right.
All right, how do I need to look out for this?
Right. And how do I create diversity of measurement techniques so that I'm not locked into one idea?
For sure.
And this is true. You can do this spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally. so when we were planning this or talking about this some this morning, we kind of started out with an idea, and we're bringing it in on the back end now. I mean, do you want to? So I was talking about our birth plan.
I don't know what she's. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I wanted to give an example of what it looks like when it all burns down.
Yeah.
Because we didn't, we just did not leave ourselves open to any other idea. So we had this.
We didn't know any better.
We found out we're pregnant. We made this birth plan. For me, the birth plan was natural birth, no meds, breastfeeding, all of the granola, like salt of the earth stuff, right? We went to the birthing class. We were literally the only couple out of like 20 couples that had a natural birth plan.
Most of which had previous children, and we're like, yeah, those.
That's right.
They're in for it.
And my daughter was super supportive of it.
Yeah.
She said, you have a really strong personality. You've done your research and stuff. Let's leave ourselves open to the other possibilities. They're like, hey, yeah, sure. Leave ourselves open to the possibility. So then what happens?
Everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
That's right.
And all heck broke loose.
That's right.
I think that we had been prepared for it being difficult.
Right.
We were very prepared that it was going to be hard, painful, just challenging.
That's right.
And you had wrapped your head around that, but never once
physical pain. I can manage that.
Well, we weren't worried about that for you. For me, different story. I'm not putting up with that.
No.
But it really boiled down to that. I don't think we had left flexibility in our plan to it not happening.
Right.
And it was good to have that confidence, but at the same exact time, like, we really shot ourselves in the foot emotionally with it by having that level of expectation of like, this will be the outcome.
That's right.
And not having a parachute reserve of how are we going to handle that in the 11th hour when
right.
nothing went as planned. You're in a lot of pain. We're worried about your safety, the Jenna's safety. It's like, then what do we do? It's like,
right.
Yeah,
we get to the point where we're like, we're going to push through. And the doctor's like, no, we can't.
Yeah.
Like, she's becoming unstable. Her heart rate's all over the place. Like, we have to do this, and we have to do this now, you know? And, and then, what happened afterward was I was on maternity leave for 9 weeks, and I spent 9 weeks just crushed by the grief of letting go of my expectations.
Yeah.
Because then I spent another 7 of that 9 weeks trying to force myself to breastfeed when it wasn't working. And I did the lactation appointments, and we did all the supplements, and you made me smoothies, and we took medication, and I
was about
pumped.
to say, I didn't do much. You did everything,
we did all this stuff. And
but I remember it being difficult for you.
Yeah.
And frustrating. And
Oh, and I can remember when I finally just took a deep breath and just, started feeding her formula. I was like, oh, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so next week we can tie in what was the why and why was that important?
Absolutely,
health, right? Yeah. So we wanted to talk about that because I think that that's a relatable example.
Yeah,
we did not leave ourselves open to another possibility.
Well, and real mental flexibility is having that preparation of what are all the different alternatives and how can we quickly and efficiently be able to assess when, all right, things are going south. How can we initiate this other, emergency plan? Yeah. Because it probably would have been a whole lot easier emotionally and physically had we been better prepared for it.
We would have certainly entered it with a lot more acceptance, which would have impacted my emotional and mental health.
For sure.
Right. And I had to realize, for me, it really wasn't and I'm not discounting, so I really be clear, when I go back and I look at it, it really wasn't postpartum depression.
Yeah.
It was me being crushed by the weight of my unrelenting expectations, and really letting go of that. And I still struggle sometimes. I mean, we had another kid. We prepared ourselves for we knew all my risk factors. So we opted to, go with the C-section the second time because I just wasn't a good candidate for a VBAC. And so we walked into that and we had a lot more peace in that process.
Yeah.
We had a lot more peace in that process. But
we had more experience, and we had talked about it more, and we had looser expectations, and we had a better idea of what the most likely scenario was, and that went a whole lot different.
And I will say this, what we did the first time around is what most people do with their change process. Yeah. And so that's why we want to talk about it. We want to have that aha moment, because then what happens is when we abandon the plan, it feels like failure. And in the end, looking back, we know it wasn't failure because we have a healthy child, right? But like at the moment, it felt like failure. And I had this happen a lot in my office. I was going to say,
I was about to say, there's a lot of other examples that are relatable.
Yeah.
One thing before we move on that I do want to say about that I think is a gift in that is that was a situation that we couldn't walk away from.
Right.
So the one of the learning lessons that I got out of that was like, one way or another,
we're having a kid.
Even if the doctor steps in and says, we're doing it my way now, we're, something is going to happen. So that forces it. There's so many other examples in our life where we throw in the towel before we see it through. And I think one of the gifts there was, even though it was difficult on the back end, one of the big gifts is to be able to walk away and realize, like, okay, I got to get to a place of acceptance with it, but we were okay, and we just had to continue pushing on through and find an alternative and adapt. And so when we move to things like in our office, when we're dealing with depression or anxiety or substance use or family discord, how can we adapt quickly and then continue with an alternative plan or solution towards the ultimate goal?
Well, and that's, the concept of ultimate goal isn't even necessarily the first goal that we visualize or the outcome we get. It's the big why, which is what we're going to dig into important. Next week, right? So I was going to use this example. I do, my licensure is addictions counseling. And so I see a lot of people in the realm of substance use, families impacted by a loved one's substance use, people in recovery, early recovery, doing like recovery management plans and learning just how to navigate sobriety, or people with advanced recovery who are in sticking points, and so a lot of times when I get somebody who's newly trying to try out this thing called recovery or sobriety, I have a process I go through with them, and we develop a toolbox of skills and things they can access and pull from in their daily lives. We come up with daily schedule or weekly schedule where they're kind of planning their time a little bit. And it's always interesting because then I go, okay, so what are the stressors? Like, let's go back to, most people before they ever actually try to formally seek help for substance use or mental health issues for that matter, or other issues. But for substance use, is they many times tried on their own to quit many times before. And so they have these examples of stressors that start to build up and then the wheels fall off. So how do we identify those stressors? And then how do we also say, what does it look like if the wheels are falling off? And then I encourage them to recruit their family and their loved ones into a support system and say, hey, I've noticed in the past, this is what this looks like. If you see this, this is what we're going to agree to do as a part of that conversation, like pre-planning. If the wheels start coming off,
what are we going to do?
That way they're a part of the process, because what most people do is the family then starts talking about them. They start making plans without them. They get paranoid. It becomes very, it can become very adversarial very quick, and it's inviting their family and how to react to that. But interestingly, we talk about the wellness toolbox. We talk about the options for support in the community. That might be mutual aid, 12-step meetings. It might be Celebrate Recovery. It might be a recovery community organization. It might be Dharma Recovery, Smart. Like all the options. We educate and just experiment with what works. But then when we start talking about the stressors and what happens if the wheels start to come out, they go, I don't want to anticipate trouble. All the time. We get to that
guess
point.
What? It's coming.
The vast majority of people say, you know what, I don't want to borrow misery from the future, so we're not going to talk about that. And
this is a different exercise than let's ruminate on worst case scenario.
Right.
Yeah.
It's that, better to be prepared and not need it.
Yeah.
Right? Than to be unprepared and need it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why I give families, how many Narcan kits? I have given a lot of Narcan kits.
Well, I get a lot of people that are shocked when I openly share with them that, like, we have a plan if one of us were to relapse. Like, we know exactly what we're going to do or execute if one of us, God forbid that ever happened, but I'm not waiting until that time period to figure out what we're going to do.
That's right.
We know ahead of time.
And we made the agreement.
Yeah.
We had that discussion.
So that process of visualizing what the outcome is, to me, one of the takeaways from what we're discussing is that this has always been about the process and not the outcome all along.
That's right. Which is the point we keep hitting over and over, but I think it's so important because it's our expectations, and we visualize that concept of visualizing what it's going to feel like, butting up against that and having that not be the reality of where we are in a moment. In the end, we may feel that way, and in spurts, we maybe feel that way. I mean, even with me recently, I've kind of unlocked a little bit of a system to help me kind of deal with some of my, physical issues, my adrenal fatigue and other things. And sometimes I feel really good about the metrics, and sometimes the metrics aren't working for me. And so I've had to just go, this isn't about what it looks like today.
This is the process.
It's about seeing it as a process and understanding that if that metric doesn't change over time, it's telling me I need to do something different.
Yeah.
Not that what I'm doing is bad or failure.
Bad or wrong. Or, absolutely.
Whereas what I normally would do is just go, screw it. It's not working anyway, so I might as well do what I want.
Yep. And then I create the exact thing that I fear,
That's
which is why solely focusing on the goals, that's why we're discussing these things, is that goal setting is important. Knowing what kind of outcome we want is important. But if we don't have a diligent process of knowing where we came from, where we're going, a plan of how to get there, flexibility of being able to adapt and adjust as necessary.
Right. And a supportive
that
cheering
end goal
section
will never occur. And we're robbing ourselves of that opportunity. The physical example I always give is nobody has ever lost 50 pounds. I think I used that the other week. Like, you have to lose 1 pound at a time. That's
right.
it. So my goal is to create a process by which I can lose a pound and then rinse, wash, and repeat.
That's right.
And when it stops working, I adapt and adjust instead of saying, oh, but I'm so quick to lose a couple pounds and then say, this doesn't work. The heck with this diet. Screw everything. We're going to McDonald's, Right. But when I stick with it over time.
I thought it was Taco Bell.
Taco Bell. I'm really unbiased. This is not an advertisement, but Taco Bell is kind of where it's at.
I mean, I just think about the Taco Bell example.
Scott knows what I'm talking about. Okay. So
I mean, I think it's just always a reminder to, like going back to this concept of mental flexibility and emotional resilience. What most of us lock into is this idea that it doesn't work. We abandon it, and then so much of it is orienting people to the fact that it's a fact-finding and fact-facing process. Yeah. Right. And that, we have to be willing to let go of what's not working, and lean into what is.
Yeah.
Also, part of that is also what works for us and how it feels. Yeah. Right. So if I'm doing eating, I have done. So when I was prepping for a bodybuilding competition, like I was losing weight, but I was freaking miserable. Yeah. You know what I mean? That wasn't a fun process. Yeah. So like, although I know that eating like that might work,
it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. And it was, there was a bigger goal in mind. And, once that goal was done and resolved,
went right back. Yeah. So consistency, sustainability, and process are kind of the three words that jump out of me from this week.
That's right.
Was there anything else? I think we covered everything that we talked about in the blog. I think that's a good ending point.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm looking forward to next week. We're going to talk a little bit further about how do we use this information. I guess the last thing that I will say is like, all right, how do we practice visualizing? You can do it through journaling, through meditation, through talking about change with a therapist or a mentor.
Going back to the role of a very supportive and supportive.
Absolutely.
Like I think that the one thing I want to say is that supportive doesn't mean not accountable. Yeah. I've been going through this the last few days with something. Is this idea like you don't have to be confrontational. Yeah. Or or controlling. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It can be supportive and still have accountability to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Because the support actually creates a trust and rapport, which creates transparency. Yeah. Which is really the birthplace of the accountability. Yeah. Sorry.
No, and that's good. So spending time with yourself through writing, through contemplation or meditation, or through speaking it with another human being is a good way to better uncover what that goal would visually look like, feel like for you, so that you can better plan in the future things that we're going to talk about. Next week we'll talk about what is that big why.
That's right.
What is the importance of why are we really doing whatever change that it is, because there's always these underlying things, and if we can tap into those as the motivating factors, it's done. Yep. And I very rarely find anyone who's unable to accomplish something when they fully tap into what that true purpose is. Sure. And they focus on a process, and that being the main reason, that are able to make whatever behavior change they need to, whatever lifestyle change they need. They oftentimes have success. But if we don't, and we keep it shallow and we keep it surface level, it doesn't have the teeth that we need. So check back in next week. We'll talk about that. You can follow us at colewellness.com. We've got all of our podcasts and blogs there. You can, I think, subscribe to the blog too, so that you can get updates. I think some people have been getting emails. Also, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, and that'll update you when we get our videos up.
You can also indicate that you want to follow our podcast on Spotify.
Yep.
So when I pull up Spotify, our podcast,
So Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Tweedle, Twitter. All of
Y'all,
them.
I have to say, like, we haven't put a lot of, because I still haven't figured out Twitter, like Twitterverse. Like, it's Scott and I've had many conversations. Like, I'm turning into that dinosaur that's like, I'm just going to stick with Facebook because that's what I know.
Or just email.
So, but I had to laugh because we've actually gotten retweeted a few times. So I'm like, oh, we're starting.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I know.
So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing. You know, I want to, you know, we've been doing some targeted thanks, but always thank you to everybody for your just continuing to support us, continuing to give us feedback. You can give us feedback at info@colewellness.com. Let us know your thoughts. Interact with us some.
Yep.
Yeah.
Number 5, done.
Yep.
Adios.
Bam. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.